That's wonderful, man. Well,
Yeah.
let's get into it. Let's get into all of it. And to begin this journey, I'd like to start with 4 years ago. We didn't quite know what this pandemic was going to bring. So I'm curious now that we're kind of in this quote unquote post-pandemic era, how did you get through it and how did it change and affect you?
Um, so we had already been planning on selling all of our stuff and, moving into an RV and traveling, before the pandemic had happened. As a matter of fact, the day we bought our RV was the same day that the governor of Pennsylvania was issuing the shutdown orders for the state. Um, so whether that actually helped us get through it or not, I can't really say. It certainly didn't hurt. We the pandemic certainly changed our timing of when we were going to launch on this journey. Um, like I said, we bought the RV the day that the shutdown orders were being issued. We at the same time we were taking our house off the market, which wasn't part of our plan to have a RV payment and a mortgage payment at the same time. It was supposed to be sell the house, buy the RV, all that fun stuff. Um, but we just kind of stayed the course. And um, when the housing market opened back up in Pennsylvania, where we're originally from, we had an agreement on the house 10 days after we'd listed it, or relisted it, I guess you could say. And we started in August of 2020. And I guess, how we got through it was just kind of taking one day at a time and enjoying the moment. And, this lifestyle that we live now, traveling throughout the country in an RV really helps you to do that, to kind of stay in that moment and just, take one day at a time because you don't know what, the future holds. I mean, in January of 2020, none of us knew what the rest of 2020 was going to look like. So I
Yeah.
think, just kind of taking things in stride and really appreciating the moment that we're in right now is probably one of the things that's, really helped us get through it.
Yeah, and I think that's the main thing about going through that time period was that there were so many levels of us that were that brought things to the top that made us find out what was important and knowing that we don't have a lot of time down here. So
Right.
you better get busy doing the things that you want to do because at any point, the meter could run out. So um and it sounds like you're doing the right thing. But you got so many things going on in your life. There's so many things that are a part of who you are. So I want to ask you this. If I put you in front of a bunch of grade school kids, third graders, it's career day, and one of the kids is curious and says, "Hey, what do you do for a living?" How do you answer that child?
So I write books, I do podcasts, and I do speaking engagements. Um, and it all kinds of adds up to a living. Um, and I think one of the things we should probably get more in the habit of is redefining what, making a living is for younger kids. When I was growing up, probably when you were growing up, it was, go to school, get a 4-year degree, you know, buy a house, get a mortgage, lock yourself down with all this debt, and then maybe when you retire, maybe you'll have, 10 or 12 years to enjoy what you just worked your whole life for. I think um, we really need to just think about again what we first said, living in the moment, enjoying the time we have because we don't know what tomorrow brings, and not locking yourself down to, being in quote unquote one career for your entire life. It's life is more about experiences than anything else. And, I mean, I'd done, I'd worked for a youth nonprofit organization for 30 years. And if you would have talked to me in 2019, I would tell you that, I would die doing that exact same thing. Um, so I think just redefining our choices and thinking more about um, how to live more than just exist, as opposed to existing for a paycheck to pay our bills. I mean, the beauty about our lifestyles, we're debt free. Um, you know, we live within our means. I think that's a big thing. And I'm going to keep saying it. We enjoy the moment. We understand what's in front of us. Right here, right now.
So take me back to the beginning of your life, where you were born and raised, and how you did spend 30 years in the nonprofit realm, with youth and sports, and how it kind of evolved into your mindset today.
Yeah. So, um, I grew up in Reading, Pennsylvania. Spent most of my childhood there, with the exception of 4 years that I lived in Florida from fourth grade to eighth grade. After my mom and dad got divorced, I'd moved to Florida with my mother. Series of bad decisions made her decide that I was probably better off going back to Pennsylvania and living with my father, which truthfully was probably, I know it was a tough decision for her, but it was probably a decision that saved my life at the time, because I was headed down a pretty dark path at that moment in time. So, um, I'm sure that's I didn't like it at the time. I resented her quite a bit at that time, but as you look back, I understand, A, how tough it was for her to make that decision, and B, um, how much of a pivotal decision that was for my life. Um, and then as I grew up, I played baseball. I wasn't like the star, outstanding player. I was a guy that had to work hard every day to get in the lineup and get my playing time. And um, I loved the game of baseball. So shortly after high school, I wanted to keep playing. I didn't go to college. I actually went to a recording school. Thought I was going to become a record producer and a audio engineer. And um, again, that didn't quite work out the way I thought. But at 20 years old, I started this organization, which, again, as you reflect back, there's probably not a lot of 20-year-old kids who are, starting nonprofit organizations at that period of their life. But I, it started out as just an organization, um, for me and a bunch of buddies to play baseball. It was an adult baseball organization. And as we grew older, we all started coaching for different organizations, and we're still playing together, but coaching against each other. But we had this kind of same philosophy of coaching that um, we had kind of learned through our playing days. Um, and it got to a point where it's like, it'd make a lot of sense if we all kind of coached under the same umbrella and, started an organization for kids. We're already working with them on, these different organizations. So we added a youth component to our organization, and that was really the game changer because we understood that we weren't just teaching these kids how to play baseball and softball, and it later evolved into other sports as well. We were really teaching them life lessons. Um, and the thing that probably stood out the most in that is we put together what they call a showcase team in 1999, where it's basically an all-star team of kids from our local county that we put together to play in one tournament. And it was an exceptional team, but we kind of saw this thing happening in the background where we took all these kids from these different environments, these different schools who were normally rivals, and put them on the same team. And now all of a sudden their rivalries turned into friendships. And that became most evident after we played the tournament one weekend, where one of our players was in a severe car accident and was paralyzed. And of the 24 kids that we had on that roster, I think about 18 of them went to see Chase while he was in the rehab center, which was about an hour and a half from our hometown. And it just, again, established this thing that we're using the game of baseball to create a much larger effect on these kids, and some that would last a lifetime. And just to see that so many of those kids went and spent time with Chase after his accident and, kind of helped him, deal with that tragedy that he was dealing with. And here, this was a kid who was on his way for a Division I college baseball scholarship at Penn State. Um, and all of a sudden his world came crashing down. And then seeing how he reacted to it, staying positive, and just understanding that, look, so baseball is no longer going to be a part of my life. So what am I going to do? now? How am I going to adjust? And to see a young kid kind of make, be able to kind of take that in stride, um, largely due to what he learned on the field, you know, um, kind of again made us understand that we were doing a lot more than just coaching kids and teaching them how to field ground balls and, hit a fastball and stuff like that. So, um, going back to my mom, she was always one who, gave back a lot, always volunteered. So the fact that I was now running this nonprofit organization and it was, you know, it wasn't just about baseball. Baseball was the tool we were using, um, just kind of made things full circle at that point. And then toward the end of my career there, I had taken two solo trips. Um, one to Dallas, Texas for the ABCA convention, the American Baseball Coaches Association convention in January of 2019. And on my way back, I didn't drive directly back to Pennsylvania. I ended up um, driving through Louisiana to see some friends of mine that we had done some softball clinics with and got together with some friends while we were in Dallas. And um, then a couple months later, did the same thing, took a um, solo trip to Orlando, Florida, to meet with a group that we were looking at doing some soccer clinics with at our complex. And on the way down, I stopped and saw one of my old players who was now living in Atlanta, Georgia, and spent some time with him. And then on the way back, just kind of took my time and enjoyed the journey more so than, worrying about getting home and getting to the destination, which was something I'd never done. As our organization did a lot of traveling to tournaments and stuff with sometimes 60 kids in tow. So enjoying the journey was not part of you know, my career at that point. It was about, when are we going to get to the destination, make sure that we, end the journey with the same number of kids that we started the journey with.
Yeah,
That we didn't leave somebody at a rest area or a gas station or a
yeah,
restaurant, Um, and to back up just a little further, my mom back in the 80s, solo traveled after I moved back to Pennsylvania with my dad. She took an old 1967 Plymouth Valiant, took the back seat out of it, put a sheet of plywood in there and a mattress, and traveled all around the country on her own. And on those two solo trips, I kind of had this aha moment where I was like, wow, I think I really now figured out why mom did what she did, because there was this incredible sense of serenity on the road and just enjoying, the perspective of a road trip. I mean, it's one thing to fly somewhere and get there, but when you're seeing the country through a windshield and making stops and getting out and getting in a little deeper, it's just a totally different experience. And when I got home from those two trips, I was in the process. I'd published my first book in 2012, and I was in the process of adding some chapters to it. Um, and I ended up writing like I hadn't written in years. Um, and that's when I kind of started, hearing this voice. It was time to close this chapter that I was currently in and open a new one and start writing more and start speaking more and using those talents I'd had. I'd always written. I'd loved writing. So I never really envisioned myself as a writer as a vocation, so to speak. Um, and at first I resisted it because, I had loved this organization. I'd birthed it. I had lived it, ate it, slept it, drank it for 30 years of my life, which at that point was 60% of my time on earth. Um, so I resisted at first because, like I said, I thought that that was my calling, so to speak, why I was here. Um, and I just kept, feeling that and ran the idea past my wife, how she thought about, if we sold everything and bought an RV and traveled around the country, and she thought I had lost my mind. She was like, "Look, that's not our story. That was your mom's story." And she was dealing with some things as well. Um, you know, with her career, she'd been laid off from a company that she was with for 23 years, and she was now working for another company as a temp to full-time employee. But every time she would have a conversation about going full-time, they would tell her there was a hiring freeze or something was going on, and it just wasn't right. So after 2 years of dealing with that, she came home one day from work after another one of those conversations about when am I going to be hired full time, and being put off. And she said, "You know what? I think this is a sign as well. Let's do it. Let's put it into motion." So I reached out to my board and told them what we were planning on doing, and put everything into motion. And um, 2020 rolled around, and the rest is history, I guess you could say.
So, as a writer, what was the first book that you wrote when you were, or the first book that you read when you were young that either made you want to read more or gave you that dream of wanting to write?
Wow, um, that's a great question. I don't know that I know what that would have been. I recall a book, I don't remember the title, that we read in school, and I just remember some of the descriptions. It was a novel. It wasn't like a memoir or anything like that, but some of the descriptions that the writer used um, to make you visualize um, what was happening in the story. Um, but I don't remember the title of the book or the writer. Um, and just as a young boy, I always enjoyed writing. Even when I was like 11 or 12 years old, I used to write a newsletter for my brother's adult soccer team. He's 9 years older than me, and I would just handwrite this newsletter on notebook paper, and my mom would make a couple copies of it for me at work, and we'd hand it out on the sidelines of his games, and just kind of seeing the um, the reactions of the players and their wives and their moms and that sort of thing was just kind of neat. So like I just always did right, but that's interesting. I never really thought about what it was that sparked or what I read that made me really go down this path. That's I'm gonna have to when we're done with this, I'm gonna really end up digging into my memory to
Good
see
deal.
what it was that triggered.
Well, let me give you something that might be a little bit easier. As a baseball fan, what was the best Major League Baseball game you ever witnessed?
Um, so that would have been uh the year it was the Red Sox and Angels. I'm a Red Sox fan.
Yeah.
It was at Fenway Park, and it was man, game game two or three of the would have been the 2003 American League Divisional Series. Um, but the Red Sox were down in the bottom of the ninth. David Ortiz came to the plate. K-Rod was on the mound, and they intentionally walked David Ortiz to get to Manny Ramirez. And Manny Ramirez hit a ball that was still when the Red Sox had the Coke bottle over the green monster in left field. And Ramirez hit a ball that cleared that Coke bottle, probably landed somewhere on the Mass Pike for all I know. And the place just erupted
Yeah.
and went absolutely crazy. Um, and I was up there actually with one of my old players. We drove up there to see the game. A friend of ours um, had we'd gotten tickets through a friend of ours, and it was just electric. Just the way the stadium exploded. And I don't
Yeah.
think anybody left that ballpark for 30 minutes after that game ended
Yeah.
because like everybody was just hugging each other and high-fiving each other, strangers. So
Yeah.
that's definitely the one that sticks in my mind.
Yeah.
Um, and I'd later there's a place in Boston a few years later, um, down in Quincy Market where they would sell just sports photos, whether it's Red Sox, Bruins, Patriots, whatever the case was, and they had um, like this two-piece photo of Manny hitting that ball and then the home plate celebration. And I'd actually bought that photo and had them uh, mat and frame my ticket stub underneath of it as well.
Nice.
So that might have been probably when we were downsizing, that piece of memorabilia might have been the most difficult one for me to give up just because there was a personal connection to it. But one of my old players ended up buying it, so if I ever need to see it, I can just go to his house and
Oh,
check it
yeah.
out. So
Absolutely. That's a great story, man. Great
yeah,
story. So, of all of these things that you've done and evolved into and become in your life, what are you the proudest of?
definitely my work with kids.
Yeah.
Um, and that's something that now, as Sandy and I travel, I get to reconnect with so many of my old players that are scattered throughout the country. When we were going through Galveston, Texas, just a few months ago, one of my old players is actually the assistant general manager for the Houston Astros now, and he drove down from Houston, had breakfast with us in Galveston. Second year in a row that he did that, that we happened to be going through Galveston. Um, and I've seen players that are in Arizona and you know California, and um, going to be connecting with one of my players when we get to Spokane in a couple days. And that's really that being able to do that really cements the work that I'd done. When you're working with kids, you're planting seeds, and a lot of times you don't get to see those seeds bloom. And I've been blessed to have the opportunity to see those seeds bloom. And again, I still call these guys kids, and a lot of them are in their late 30s, early 40s, early 30s, depending on what period of time I'd coached them. So that's special, and that's definitely the thing I think I'm most proud of, because it creates this ripple effect that goes on and on and on. Because when they're sitting there and telling you firsthand things that you know you had taught them on the field that they're now using in their career, whether they're still in baseball or whether they're, in marketing or sales or an entrepreneur or whatever the case is, that's a pretty special feeling.
So, at the end of the day, everyone has a perception of you, family, friends, readers, everybody that knows you. But at the end of the day, you're in control. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
Um, I think I'm just a guy who's trying to make whatever positive impact on the world he can. Um, whether that's through my writing, through my, you know, coaching back in the day, or now just, meeting people. I mean, I love most of the book signings that I do are actually in grocery stores. I'm part of a program called National Authors in Grocery Stores, which is kind of a unique spot to sign books. So it's not like there's this big marketing campaign going on. It's like I'm showing up in the grocery store and setting a table up and selling books. And um, just some of the conversations I have with people during a book signing. Some of them don't, we'll have a great conversation. They may not buy a book. Some of them do. It's not the point. But that just interaction and ability to kind of connect with someone that you first meet, and something that I've done resonates with them, whether it's us traveling full time, or it's whether my coaching experience or just writing in general. I've met so many people who are like, oh man, I wish I could write a book. And I'm like, you can, like, just start writing. Like
Yeah.
that's the first step, is just start writing and see
Yeah.
where it goes. Um, so yeah, just somebody out there trying to make a positive impact, in whatever small way I can. I mean, the subtitle of my own podcast is Many Little People in Many Little Places, which comes from the opening lyrics of a Michael Franti song, Gloria, which go, when many little people in many little places do many little things, and the whole world changes. And I think if all of us just focus on the little things that we can do to make the world a little bit better place, as opposed to, you know, the big problem, like the big problem is made up of a lot of little problems.
Yeah.
So if we can focus on our own little problems and change those all together, then collectively we can actually, change the bigger problems in the world.
Yeah, that's brilliant. So let me ask you this, on your show, if you could have an interview with one person on the planet that you would love to meet and interview, who would that be?
It would actually probably be Michael Franti,
Okay.
just because of using that song as my subtitle, and the way his music has influenced my life in general. He would probably be the one guy I would absolutely love to have on my podcast at some point. And I've had his drummer on my podcast
Yeah.
twice,
Yeah.
so hopefully someday I'll have Michael as well.
You're getting close. So
Getting close.
If anybody wants to get your books, get involved with your podcast, any of the good work that you do out there, what's the best way to do it?
Best way to just go to my website. It's journeymymotherson.com, or because that's quite a mouthful and quite a, if you're a hunt and peck keyboard guy like me,
Yeah.
danclouser.com will get you to the same site. But everything's there. All my links to social media, links to my books. You can get them directly on my website signed, or there's a link there to get them through Amazon. But basically, if you go to my website, everything that you need to find out, if you want to book me for speaking, all of that stuff is right there on the website. So that's really kind of the one-stop shop that'll get you to where you want to go to dig in more.
I love these stories of this existential rise to the personal top of your mountain. It's inspiring and refreshing. Thank you for sharing your story, Dan. I appreciate it. Keep doing the good work.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yes, sir. Take care.